Hello and welcome to Culturico's first ever interview as part of our series of opinion posts on humans, their culture, politics, language, and science. Today, we will be interviewing Professor Randy Schekman, Nobel Prize winner for physiology and medicine for his work on cell membrane vesicle trafficking, alongside James Rothman and Thomas C. Sudhoff. In this interview, however, we will be focusing on Professor Schekman's long-standing interest in and campaigning for open access science. My name is Alexander Brown, and I am a contributing author and linguistic editor at Culturico, and I will be your interview host for what promises to be a fascinating look at Professor Schekman's work for open access science and against some of the major players in scientific publishing. Without further ado, let's begin. Okay, Professor Schekman, thank you very much for joining me. I wanted to begin by asking, how do the most prestigious journals make money, in your opinion?
Well, the most prestigious journals make money by charging not only authors to publish and charging and then having advertising, but I think their biggest profit margin comes from the licenses that they issue to institutions for subscription. I'll give you one example that is in the news now and which I have followed very closely, and that is the recent contract negotiation between Elsevier, the publisher of the Nature and Lancet journals, but thousands of other journals. They have quite a profit margin that they derive from very substantial license agreements issued to institutions. One of the largest consortiums that they negotiate with is the entire University of California system, which is responsible for 10% of the scholarly output of the United States. In the past contract period, the budget called for $11 million a year from the entire UC system. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, given the budget of the entire UC system is in the billions, but the libraries are only a small fraction of that entire budget. And Elsevier, in that contract period, accounted for fully 1/4 of the subscription costs of the UC system. 1/4 of all of their budget was devoted to an $11 million a year contract. Now, the university has taken the position, one that I've very strongly supported, that they want to encourage, indeed insist on, the papers of their scholars being in open access format. So they attempted to negotiate a contract with Elsevier that called for a renewal at that same budget, but with every paper in every Elsevier journal being available to the world in an open access format. Elsevier, of course, has been fighting open access, though they claim that they have many open access journals. The majority of their journals, the majority of their publications are behind a firewall. And they refused the proposal from the university. They countered over several months of negotiation with a budget proposal that called for a nearly twofold doubling in the expense to the university, with the provision that the Cell and Lancet journals would not be available in an open access format. Of course, these are the most popular journals in the UC system, and the university said, forget it. So they walked away from the table, and now there is an impasse. I think this impasse will go on for a very long time. But University of California has joined Germany, Sweden, Norway, and Hungary in basically canceling subscriptions to the Elsevier journals. Now, to give you an idea of the really unacceptable profit margin that Elsevier has extracted from institutions, they are one of the most profitable companies in the world, with a near 40% profit margin on their publishing, in their publishing division. And to put it more precisely, I found the following two data points that illustrate basically how avaricious they are. So the $11 million contract with the University of California is for the thousands of Elsevier journals. The university has many other such contracts. One smaller one is with the U.S. National Academy of Sciences. For the one journal, they publish the proceedings of the National Academy. So I'm a former editor of that journal, so I know it very well. That contract for the UC system is only $25,000 a year. Okay, 25,000 versus 11 million, but one journal versus thousands of journals. How do you compare the two? It's very easy. If you compute the cost per download of a paper accessed from the PNAS throughout the University of California system, the cost per download is 4 cents. If you compute the cost per download for an Elsevier paper throughout the university system, it's $1.04. That's a 26-fold difference in cost. So when Elsevier claims that they have legitimate expenses for publication, they surely do. I know well what it costs to publish a paper. But the price difference is unacceptable. It's obscene, and I applaud the university for canceling that contract, and I'm calling for all other institutions to do likewise.
Can we define these prestigious journals as lobbies in a way? And if so, why do scientists allow the journals to behave in this manner? Should they have more power over it?
Well, the power is collectively with us, but we're many young scholars feel powerless. They feel as though if they don't publish their paper in these brand name journals, so these publishers and the journals have been very successful, particularly the commercial ones, very successful in branding themselves and creating the illusion that if you don't publish in these journals, you won't have a career. You know, very often people believe, and I'm afraid it's true, that those who sit in judgment for jobs and fellowship applications and grants, they're busy people. They don't have the time to read the papers, so they look at where they're published. Or worse yet, they look at this meaningless number, journal impact factor, and judge the value of a piece of scholarship on the basis of that number or the name of the journal. And so it would take a concerted change in the culture to change the feeling of powerlessness that young scholars have. So I have, as you know, taken a very strong position. I will not publish in these journals. Others who are in secure positions like me have agreed and have joined this, and I think we just need to work very hard to convince others that the emperor has no clothes, and the journals Cell and Nature and Science, which I include in this powerful triumvirate of journals that have a hegemony in life sciences. These journals don't have superior judgment. In fact, I think their judgment is clouded by the fact that the professional editors who make the important decisions in these journals are in a position that are in a conflicted position, because basically they are in the position of they are hired to sell magazines, so they're looking for buzz. They deny this, but they're looking for papers that will create a sensation, that will generate citations, that will make them look better. So I think the whole system is a house of cards, and I call on my scholars not only to publish in open access journals, but to eschew those journals that rely on professional editors for the final determination. I tell my lab that I'll be happy to publish in almost any journal as long as it's an active scholar who's making the decision about what papers should be reviewed and what papers should be published.
So speaking more generally, what do you feel are the consequences of this triumvirate, this current publishing system, for scientific progress in society?
Yeah, well, it distorts the subject areas that people pursue, because in order to generate more citations, these editors favor popular, fashionable topics, and so people flock to these areas because they're considered fashionable, and it's all based on this completely meaningless impact factor number, which is a number determined by the total number of citations to a journal over a 2-year window. So if you're looking only at the most recent 2 years, of course you're looking for papers that are going to be instantly recognized as so-called high impact. So the deep scholarship that really makes a difference often is in papers that aren't recognized right away. I'll give you an example of a terribly important paper that was overlooked for years. Seymour Benzer, great geneticist, bacterial geneticist, and then a fly geneticist at Caltech, 40 years ago, published a paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy, which was the first genetic evidence for a circadian rhythm clock in the fruit fly. That mutant formed the basis of subsequent careers of three eminent younger scholars who won the Nobel Prize 2 years ago for adding to what was Benzer's original discovery. That Benzer paper was cited a total of 10 times over the first 10 years after it was published. So
amazing.
It would never have been considered by Nature or Cell or Science because, a clock mutant in the fly, who cares? So the system is distorted by an over-reliance on this, what I call phony number, or certainly meaningless number, the impact factor, and by the pressure that these professional editors feel to generate attention for their papers and for their journal, because they're selling magazines.
Yes, and I suppose that like single discoveries, which wouldn't make a whole publication, get ignored as well. Could I possibly ask you about Plan S and
Yes.
what your opinion is of Plan S?
Yes, well, I'm a fan of that because I think the open access movement started in Britain. It has spread with some influence through the Wellcome Trust throughout Europe. And I don't see the American government funding agencies pushing as hard for open access, but I'm delighted that in Europe it's now considered a strong possibility. The devil is in the details. A lot of journals rely on at least a small profit margin to sustain their scientific society. So many journals are very concerned about this. The U.S. National Academy, the PNAS, the Journal of the National Academy, they're very concerned about if they have to go open access, whether they'll be able to maintain their budget. They have by charter a requirement to not be a burden on the National Academy, nor can they generate profit, so they have to break even. They claim that their break-even point would be to charge $6,000 for each publication, which is considerably more than they charge now. I think that number is high. They have had an open access option for many years, even before I became the editor, and about close to 30% of the authors opted for that open access possibility, and they were charged an extra fee accordingly. I think that extra fee should be enough, together with the publication fee, to allow a journal like that to be sustained. So other scientific societies are very nervous about this, but it's inevitable, and I think the libraries can be counted on to continue to help. The librarians everywhere that I meet in all university and research institutes are very favorably inclined to open access. I told the librarians of the UC system that I think what they could do would be to take their entire budget for subscriptions and cancel all their subscriptions, and then turn the money over to the campuses to be issued to scholars to help supplement the cost of publication fees. I see no reason why the entire repertoire of journals couldn't be open access. And so Plan S, I think, is a bold initiative which I strongly support.
I almost have two questions branching out from there. The first, I wonder if there are organizations that are working against Plan S.
Yes, of course. Many, indeed, I would say most are working against Plan S. Certainly the commercial journals are fighting it as vigorously as possible, because
that's a problem for its existence.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Elsevier is a very powerful force, even though the entire German scientific society, the universities and the Max Planck Society have canceled their subscription to Elsevier. The scientists in Germany continue to publish in Cell. It's just astonishing to me, and my own colleagues here at the University of California, mindful of the cancellation of the Elsevier contract, continue to feel that, they're trapped. They have to publish and sell. So, I think they lack courage, the courage of their convictions. So I challenge them at every corner. But so there will be a very strong political movement against it. However, we're seeing progress. The Gates Foundation insists that all of the scholarship of the people that they support must be published in open access journals. The Wellcome Trust has developed a plan, a 2020 plan, to more or less insist on this for the publications of the Wellcome Trust scholars. And the Howard Hughes Medical Institute is also thinking about mandating open access publication for at least the most prominent publications of the investigators of the Howard Hughes Institute. So in fact, many scholars that I know who generally agree with me feel powerless, but they feel that if they are told by their funding agencies that they must publish in open access, they will simply do that. So they're like sheep, but if that's what it takes, then it has to come from the funding agencies. They have to finally decide enough and just insist on it. And then the journals will follow. Even the commercial journals, they'll have to, cut their profit margin and find a way to get on.
So you suggest that the funding agency is crucial, so it's a political matter.
They have the greatest leverage.
Can academia do more to help itself? Or
well, I think the University of California libraries are doing what they can. I mean, they've canceled their subscription to Elsevier, and they claim that they're having more success with Springer Nature, but I'm dubious that Springer Nature would agree to the contract model that the university proposed to Elsevier. But fine, if Springer Nature and Elsevier eventually come around and agree that papers should be openly accessible, that's fine. Then I'll continue to take my crusade against these journals, because I think they really, the editorial model does not work to our advantage as scholars. But at least this will remove the excessive profit margin from the incentive from at least the commercial operations.
Which important steps remain to be taken?
Yeah, well, I think the next step is for scholars to come out in support of Plan S in Europe. I'm afraid a lot of them are very reluctant to do so, not because they favor Elsevier or Springer Nature, but because they're worried about the scientific society journal.
So I also wanted to ask, what are the roles of preprints and also researcher-to-researcher publication in all this?
Yeah, well, the preprint archives have been a really tremendous boon. Again, in the U.S., the bioarchive simply follows the model that was set 35 years ago by the physics archive. I mean, many in the physics community simply expect to post their papers when they're ready on the physics archive. This has been going on for generations, and I'm optimistic that the bioarchive will do likewise. And the surprise to me is that the commercial journals have more or less been forced to accept this, and so people who still want to publish and sell Nature and Science can post their papers on the bioarchive. I'm surprised that commercial journals did it. Cell did so very reluctantly, but they eventually were really forced to because everybody saw the value of this. So this is a good thing, but still, it's not the only thing. People, the experience with the physics archive is that even after all these years, people still feel they have to publish in properly peer-reviewed journals. So 80% of the things that are posted on the physics archive eventually get published somewhere in a respectable journal. So that it hasn't really diminished to a great extent the, I say, pernicious influence of this triumvirate, cell, nature, and science. But I applaud it, and I encourage all of my colleagues to post their findings as soon as they feel ready to publish. They should post it on bioRxiv and establish credit for their work.
Splendid. The last question is almost a little bit cheeky. I hope you don't mind. So I read your article in The Guardian back in 2013, where you state that you no longer have any of your lab publishing in any of this triumvirate of of big papers, Nature, Cell, Science. Yeah. Has it occurred that any of your collaborators or anyone who maybe maybe some of your students or postdocs you wanted to succeed in academia ended up publishing there?
Well,
so how do you feel about it?
I have, yeah. You know, my record is open. I have, since I made that declaration, I have published as a co-author, I think probably a couple of papers in one of those journals. And I could have, I believe I could have simply withdrawn my name, but I didn't, because I didn't want to offend the senior author or the corresponding author by doing so, because in the instance that comes to mind, he was at that point still an untenured faculty member, and if I had taken that initiative to simply say, go ahead and publish it there, but take my name off it, he might have gotten a little concerned. So, but going forward now, my position is I will not have my name, even as a co-author. I certainly have never submitted something myself to any of these journals.
Well, I mean,
and my students know that they don't even, the subject never even comes up. That, you know, there are the vast majority of journals
Professor Schekman, thank you very much indeed for meeting with Culturico, and we shall be publishing this video very shortly on our blog. Thank you very much.
Okay, good luck. Thanks for chatting.
Thank you.